I wanted to touch on the pollutant of cigarette smoking. Of course, this was just so interesting to research the subject because it was normal for people to smoke in the 30s and 40s. It was cool to smoke, and it's kind of cool to smoke now. But in the 30s and 40s, the tobacco companies, of course, really just put tons of money and effort into convincing people that it was not only fun to smoke, but it was healthy to smoke. The R.J. Reynolds Company it was called the More Doctors campaign in the 40s, and it was more doctors smoke Camels. So what they did is they had their independent research company, which was actually an arm of R.J. Reynolds, go out and give cigarettes to all the physicians. They gave them cartons of cigarettes and provided all the cigarettes they wanted. And so more doctors smoke Camels. You know, they didn't say. Now the same thing happens in dentistry. They send us these gigantic tubes of toothpaste, and then I'll see the ad not much later. More dentists prefer whatever. So you have to, really be careful about all the different advertising. In response to more doctors smoke Camels, there was emerging scientific evidence and speculation, of course, that can this be healthy for me? Is this really a good thing for me to be sucking all this smoke in? So in response to that, the American Tobacco Company, Lucky Strike, they said, "Oh, our cigarettes are toasted," and it was absolutely no difference in anything. But it was a fabulous advertising campaign because they also enlisted physicians. And it doesn't matter what science says as long as the doctor says this, right? I mean, that was really, they were suggesting that the physician's clinical judgment should trump any science. And so they said it's toasted. Well, that lasted until about the mid-50s, and then filtered cigarettes started coming out. And then finally in 1978, a really interesting thing too, the tobacco companies are what kept the American Medical Association journal alive during the Depression. So it was not until 78 that the American Medical Association said actually that, oh wow, their cigarettes are harmful. So you have to be kind of careful what you listen to. Of course, I am so thankful that we're created with such an amazing body, a resilient body. The lungs can regenerate over years. A couple of interesting facts, like in 1 to 9 months after a person stops smoking, your body, you greatly decrease your risk of infection, and the cilia, the little hair-like projections in your lungs, start to regenerate. And that's what keeps people from getting pneumonia. That's what gets all of the toxins out of your lungs. It takes, though, about 15 years for the lungs to totally regenerate and for the risk of heart attack to be the same as a non-smoker. Well, there's a lot of herbicides that we all use in our gardens. We've used plenty in our gardening in the past. And an interesting fact that I think is compelling for me is that plants that are raised organically, that are raised with compost, and that have to struggle some, that have to get their nutrients from the sun and from the soil, pack a lot more nutrients than plants that are raised with herbicides and pesticides. It's kind of the, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger thing, I think. But there is mounting evidence. The evidence is very difficult to compare apples to apples because you have to have the exact same cultivar, the exact same, everything to get a good study. But there's a lot of empirical evidence just in the increase in phytonutrients. If you measured like vitamin A, it might be the same or similar, but it's the phytonutrients that we know now that really make people a lot healthier. Does anybody remember DDT when you were a kid? Yeah, I can remember Bumpus Park getting fogged one time. And this is a organochlorine that's, of course, a bug killer, a mosquito killer, and it is a persistent organic pollutant. In all the lab tests, of course, it disrupts all the hormones, including thyroid, causes a lot of reproductive problems and birth defects, and liver problems. It raises liver enzymes and causes pancreatic cancer. Now, The tests are mostly animal tests because you can't get human clinical trials of these persistent organic pollutants. There's no way, so we can only test them on lab animals, and we can't know. I mean, that's not a direct correlation, but we can take clues and we can look at the world and how things have happened there. We know they're toxic to fish and birds and all of that. DDT is pretty interesting because it was banned in 1972, and before that it was used very, very heavily, especially in the 50s. A lot of mosquitoes developed a resistance to it, and it was used in houses. I mean, they would spray picnic areas, just all over the place. Even though it was banned in 72, and it's persistent, it's what's called a persistent organic pollutant, it's used in other countries. So a big part of it's on apples. If you buy apples that are not organic, you will be getting some DDT possibly because it's used in other countries. Although it's banned here, we allow it to come back in here. This is just an interesting graph on the eagle population. The thing it did to the eagles, it caused their shells to be weak. So the shells just didn't form enough for the babies to hatch out. And whenever the eagle was taken as the national symbol in 1782, we had 100,000 nesting eagle nests in what was the United States at that time. Well, by 1963, of course, the United States had expanded, and that was down 75%. Now, so many good things have been done to help repopulate the eagles, but that was an area that we could see that was the result of DDT. So hopefully I've convinced you to be wary of advertising. There are all kinds of hilarious of ads through my research that were really amazing. Well, I didn't really know if someone had asked me what genetic modification was, I would have said, well, it's just so that tomato can be bigger, or it can be maybe more packed with nutrients. Well, those are reasons that genetic modification were done. There's things, people have been hybridizing food throughout the centuries and trying to get bigger corn and better yields. Now, the thing is that genetic modification is actually a little different because it's taking one species and injecting it with a different species. For instance, a real common thing in tomato plants is the insertion of a gene from the winter flounder. That's a fish that grows in super cold climates in the north. And so they inject this fish gene into tomatoes, and that makes the tomato, it's like antifreeze for the tomato. So it makes the tomato not get frostbitten. And we don't know if those are bad things. You know, we don't know. This has only been around for not even 20 years. So in some cases it's probably good, but in some cases it's probably really not very good. The thing that makes genetic modification undesirable, in my view, is that it's done commonly to make plants resistant to pesticides. So you saw the little picture where the guy was spraying each individual plant. Well, that cost a lot of money to hire people to do that. So they would rather, they found ways to be able just to fog these big fields with pesticides, and to do that, they had to make the plant resistant to the pesticide that was going to kill the bugs. So consequently, genetically modified plants are typically very resistant to pesticides. Therefore, they're very heavily laden with pesticides. So when you buy something that's genetically modified, you can know that it will have probably about a 10-fold dose of pesticides on it. So if you look here, I mean, if the squirrels know what to eat, I think we should too. That's pretty important. A big area of interest is that the companies who produce GMO foods don't want them labeled. And you know, if people know what they're buying, that's great. If there are genetically modified foods and people know what that means and they choose to buy them, great. Let us vote with our dollar. But there's just a lot of companies that don't. The companies that own the seeds, there's some fascinating things going on in Hawaii. they're genetically modified papayas now. Well, a lot of these seeds don't reproduce because they're just so hybridized, they don't reproduce, but about 10% of their seeds do. So if those seeds blow to someone else's field, it is legally bound that Monsanto, mostly Monsanto, but some other companies, own the other person's crop. Because once those seeds cross-pollinate with anything else, they own it. So keeping food pure is really tough these days.